Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. And I'd just like to say at the top, thank you to Oracle for sponsoring this session. It's always great to have our trusted partners on board for this sort of thing, so thank you very much. So without too much of a delay, because I think we're on a bit of a tight time scale, I'd like to introduce the panel. I will go Zach, Rajesh, Carla, and Shoaib, and they will introduce themselves to you in a moment. As Oleg said, I'm Emma Jones, Head of Commercial Services at the VPC, and the topic we have today is the ethics of AI. And we've been down a rabbit hole already once today, okay? So this could go on till bedtime. So it's a super interesting topic. We're going to try and keep ourselves inside the time, but we'd be very happy to take questions afterwards. So do you want to kick off, Shoaib, with introducing yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Shoaib Kamran from Oracle. I work in the telco and media advisory, helping clients with their digital transformation journey. So yeah, very excited to be here.
Carla?
Hi, hello, good afternoon. I'm Carla Penedo. I'm currently leading offer development and architecture at Celfocus. We have been partnering with Vodafone for more than 22 years. And in the last 5 to 6, we have also been able to build AI solutions. So very happy to be here and discuss this topic with you.
I am Rajesh. I've been in the telco industry since ever I remember, I guess 25 years or more. But currently, I'm working with Prodapt, the CTO out there. Happy to be here.
Zach Doffman from Digital Barriers. So we're a partner to Vodafone. We provide the business surveillance technology, and we deal with AI, video security and surveillance. So this is a subject very dear to our hearts.
Thank you. And Rajesh, special thank you to you, because I know you've flown a very long way to be with us.
It's a pleasure.
So thank you. So I'll kick off with you, Shoaib. So whose job is it to define the ethics and values that should be at the heart of AI?
Yeah, it's an exciting topic. So not so long ago, I was doing my PhD in intelligent agents 10, 15 years ago. I remember talking to other researchers about ethical issues. Who defines ethics? What is ethical and what is not ethical? I mean, I wasn't thinking that so soon, outside of the research, I'll be talking in our projects and talking to clients about the ethical issues. So the question for me back then and now, it still remains, what is ethical and what is not ethical? I mean, take simple example, autonomous cars. People say, yeah, is it ethical to let you go through the trial and error while some lives may be lost, but more lives will be saved? I mean, there's opinion on both sides. I don't know which one is ethical and which one is not. But as we see ethics, yeah, of course, we want it to be fair. It should respect our privacy, security, should be, conscious of the environment, diversity and inclusion, and so on and so forth. But that's just very high level. When it comes to machines taking decision on our behalf, it's much, much more complex. I think the clients I see, and the system we're talking, they're still confined to what they do. So, for example, it could be financial system doing some risk assessment or whatever, in healthcare doing some patient diagnosis to other invention, or could be, just in business, customer behavior analysis to so many other things. But they are still confined to more or less in the domain they work in. The challenge becomes, especially on ethical side, is when the systems start connecting in a digital society. For example, my personal data is now linked with business data, and they all start communicating. That's where the challenge comes, because ethics, it's going to be layer by layer. We're talking algorithms, layers of algorithms, a lot of data. It could be complete biased data. So it's much more challenging, and personally for me, I think the time is now. Otherwise, if we start going back and putting all the ethical fixes when the system become much more, the AI system are much more mainstream than now, it's going to be very expensive, complex, and so yeah, the time is now that we should be.
It's almost a philosophical debate first, isn't it?
Yeah.
You could sit here for hours figuring out what the ethics mean, what do they mean to...
Yeah,
it's
who
very
defines
subjective,
them,
isn't it?
who controls them, who needs to be involved, do we have all the right people involved, you know? It's a multidisciplinary approach, and yeah, so I'll let my other panelists, you know, share their
And it
views.
does mean different things in different countries, and I know, Zach, this is your sort of, I wouldn't say specialized area, but you've got a particular opinion here. So in terms of where the different approaches are taken, insofar as ethics and AI are concerned, I know you've got some interesting views.
I think that the assumption would be that a lot of the people in this room are here because they care about this subject. And we know that it generates a lot of headlines here in Europe and in the US. The whole ethics behind AI. I work in the surveillance industry, and nowhere has generated more headlines on AI with things like facial recognition and various bans, and the situation in China and other countries where the general view is that things have got slightly out of hand. But the real challenge is that there's nobody really charged with regulating AI. There isn't a global standard, there's no global body. And so the challenge you have for an industry or a government regulator in the AI sphere is if you make decisions to restrict what happens in your country, in your domain, not everybody is going to follow suit. And so what that means is if you are in the US, where we've seen cities and states banning use of facial recognition through the backlash we've seen over the last few years, that's fine. But ultimately that restricts the technology development in the US. There are no such restrictions in China and other countries around the world. And so what then happens is those other companies, that other industrial complex moves forward. Sitting behind the AI ethics debate, there's a political, financial, and military battle. And let's be very clear, AI is a nation-state level challenge. There is a battle between East and West, and AI is right at the heart of that. And the huge levels of investment are going into that. And underneath that, there are companies and organizations and research houses that are trying to play this game, this balancing act in terms of what's okay and what's not okay. And while we'll debate today how we might regulate and how far is too far and where the risks are, reality is that debate is not taking place in much of the world. And we have to be clear of the consequences if we make decisions here that aren't going to be reflected elsewhere.
Yeah, and you didn't, yeah, great, thank you. You did say it though, didn't you? Sorry, in joke, that's right. So, insofar as the regulation piece is concerned and who is responsible and who should own it, industry versus regulator versus government, all the rest of it, I know Carla and Rajesh, you've talked about this. So, Carla, do you want to tell us what you think of whose responsibility should it be to input into the ethics and the potential regulation of them?
So, in order to ensure that AI considers ethical, there is for sure a long journey to make. And there are many stakeholders that need to be part of it. Businesses, software vendors, also government for sure, and regulatory commissions. Up to now, in terms of research, the research has been mainly focused on theoretical aspects, on defining ethical principles such as accountability, fairness, explainability, promoting good, doing no harm, and so on. So when we talk about principles, frameworks, and standards that are already being defined and created, we also need to think about the value, and we understand the value when it is put into practice. And we already know from real situations that there are reasons to be concerned. So, of course, legislation, regulation is mandatory, but, for instance, as businesses and as Celfocus system integrators, what can we also do in order to do this path, do this journey? So I'd like to talk a little bit about some of them and also the challenges that are associated, because there are challenges everywhere. So first, it's important also to start thinking about ethical requirements, because if we start thinking about ethical issues in the beginning, we can define, analyze, we can test it, we can evaluate in simulated scenarios before going to the real world. And for that, we need also to consider not just the direct users, as we used to do in other types of solutions. We also need to consider all the stakeholders that somehow influence or get affected by this. Since we are talking about making a list of requirements, is this an easy task? Unfortunately not, because there are subjectivity, there are different cultures, so there is not a solution that fits it all. And do not forget that technology goes way ahead. So right now we have some ethical dilemmas, but for sure more are yet to come. Also, a very important thing is the capacity to build a very robust data platform. So we know what makes AI special. It's data, specifically personal information. So we want to be able to create and to ensure that we have GDPR compliance, we have privacy security mechanisms, and of course, this is guaranteed by the technology, and we already have the technology to do that. But also a very important topic that is not related with technology is handling consent. And here, I think, realize the challenge. Can you guarantee that when someone says yes to get access to a specific application and to use it, is it a well-informed decision? It is conscious. Do the people know what they are consenting? And the answer again is not. Another topic which is also very relevant is the need to create solutions that are transparent, that are explainable. So what does it mean? It means that we don't want black boxes. Okay? No one wants black boxes. We want to be able to inspect an AI system, understand why it behaves in a certain way, and if it is not correct, we want to be able to act on it, understand the cause, change it, correct it, so that it won't happen again. We want to be able, for instance, to know why a specific recruitment tool has bias against women. We want to know why a man gets a credit limit 10 times higher than his wife's when they are sharing the accounts and the assets and everything. And these are all real situations that already happen. And when we are talking about machine learning, that is not the case. In many situations, we cannot understand what is happening because it is not explicitly programmed. So it is based on data. And by the way, the data that we are providing is real data, but is historical data that represents us as a society. And that is already biased. It is already skewed. It already shows inequality. The data that we use for these algorithms has colors. We have white data, we have black data, we have other colors. It has ethnicity, it has age, it has so many other features. So we are giving this data, okay, to an algorithm that does not work based on ethics. It works based on mathematics, on probabilities. And that's what it uses to come out to a specific conclusion. So if we don't understand how a given solution works, and it is, for instance, defining who gets hired, who gets fired, how much money am I going to pay for an insurance, how can we believe and embrace this type of solutions?
So if I can interrupt you there for a sec, Carla, just Rajesh, just on that, how can we ensure that the ethics form part of AI?
Yeah. First of all, I just reacted to Shoaib's what is ethics story, right? So what I'm finding governments are doing is not getting in the ethics part, but going on the risk side, right? So the highest risk, and you have an era, like your 4 levels of risk. Clearly, disaster is not acceptable. Whichever way you say, they don't need to define ethics out there. And then next comes individual damage, like I get killed or whatever it is, right? And then you have minor things. So that is one way you actually get out the ethics argument, which is pretty long and cannot be resolved probably, into something which is very operational, right? And so in fact, the EU itself has got guidelines for AI implementation today, where they have 4 levels of risk defined, and based on the risk level, you mandate certain things. So at the highest level, the most risky, the most unacceptable kind of risks are subject to highest security and scrutiny, and then so on. So if you set up that kind of a framework, which incidentally countries are doing it, EU has got a mandate, and I was just reading to the morning that by 2025, second half, EU would be compliant in some sense to AI being appropriately deployed in public use. Governments, India is doing it for that matter, and then so is Canada, I know for that. Australia, I saw the other day is doing. So everybody is up into this, which is a good sign. So at least the governments are waking up. And I think once the government is pushing this, it'll be a mandate. So it's very difficult to escape that, at least for the big corporations and also for the high-risk categories. Now, having put that out of the way, so I think the only thing which remains is what Carla was saying, right? Data, for example. See, as an AI developer or as an AI developing organization, we ourselves do it, right? I definitely want to give good ethical AI solutions to my customers, but I don't know how to make it really ethical. My intent is very clear, but I don't know how to make it ethical. So that's where I would look at either universities or standard bodies to provide me with mechanisms, test data, for example, which is, test data today is probably biased. After 5 years, you have better test data. So we have the test data, we have mechanisms to certify what is ethical, right? And I would run my models on those, against those kind of platforms, which are public platforms, known to all, acceptable to everybody else, no debate out there, right? So if you do like that, then you can operationalize the machine learning and AI algorithms on a good, up to a good level of confidence that people can believe. And secondly, they'll get updated, right? So you're going to keep on having research from universities and publish new information of how to do things better and so on, how to tweak models. So I think if you do something like that, then you can seriously have a society which is operationally AI safe, or at least it's not reasonably ethical, I would say. There are always fringe cases, you can't have that. But this is what I was thinking. So I think the role to play is by governments to mandate, by research organizations to find means of doing it right, by standards bodies to publish protocols and data and platforms which can be used for certification. Very much like GDPR, what was there a few years ago, right? Today, we in India follow GDPR, simply because it was the only way to work with Europe. So once it happens like that, I think we will have a very compliant, I would say at a base level. Again, you can always find counterexamples. But this is what I think is the way to go on, at least in this path.
Thanks, Rajesh. And I think, yeah, wouldn't it be great if there was a practical, operationally effective way of regulating this, and there would be no need for government intervention, all the rest of it. But even if we had some amazing regulatory framework, be it through industry or through government, Shoaib, how do we enforce it, even if we have it?
I'll pick on Zach's point about different regions doing different things in the space of AI. So Oracle did a study on AI, which regions are more positive and enthusiastic about. So that was particularly in HR, but I think it reflects in other areas as well. So among lots of other findings, one finding I found really interesting was, so they did the survey in different regions, China, India, Brazil, for example, people who were more positive about adopting AI compared to, say, Europe, particularly France and UK, they were like 60, 70% on one side, 30 and up to 30, 35, and 40% on European side. To me, that's really interesting.
Was it commissioned by who?
Oracle.
Oh, just checking.
Oracle with one research partner, I can't remember the name, but it was, I think, to me, I was thinking, I don't know the answer. What was the reason why the adoption rate in one region would be more? At least they're more excited about it. I don't know whether we watch a lot of, we care about data privacy or our privacy more or our freedom more, or we watch too many documentaries or these Hollywood movies, AI taking over. I don't know. But what is really clear that there is definitely a bit more education needed when it comes to, because AI is going to happen regardless, whether it's companies or countries, they still need to do it. Otherwise, they'll simply lose out. So yeah, for me, that's the area I'm more interested. Let's go a bit more practical. Yes, there's going to be regulation of different level, but let's define it now before it gets too complicated, like I said earlier, and it becomes more challenging.
So Zach, how do you think we can enforce it, or do you think it's impossible to enforce? What do you think?
So Stephen Hawking, right? So
Love this.
He was a famous commentator on AI as well as everything else that he did. And if I remember, I think he won something like AI could be the best thing that's ever happened to human civilization. It could be the worst thing, and if we're not careful, it will be the last thing. And it was slightly tongue-in-cheek, but not completely. I think, picking on Shoaib's point, there's a lot of, AI is a reflection of us as society. It's the brutal truth that underpins the society that we've built. And I think there's a whole raft of considerations in what we allow to be deployed in our name around, what outcomes we want. The AI will deliver the outcomes you want. If we're in China and we want civil obedience, that's what it will deliver. It will find a way to deliver that. If you want cheap financial services, faster processing for chickens, whatever that happens to be, better healthcare, more targeted health insurance, it will deliver the outcomes. We need to decide what those outcomes are. But in your survey, I think the 2 points that come out of that is kind of different cultural attitudes, not to AI, but to state control and levels of privacy and independence and autonomy, because people react based on what they're used to, but also education, the point that you made. And I think with AI, it's really interesting that there's even here in Europe, a limited understanding across most of the population in terms of why there is a debate and what the actual implications are of some of these technologies that are being deployed. And that's really hard to explain because the media narrative is driven by the horror stories, facial recognition, and what we don't see is the balanced narrative. And I think for there to be that debate, that has to take place.
Yeah.
Carla, so even if we did come up with this framework and rules and regulation and all the rest of it, I don't know, we're okay. Do you think it's possible to enforce?
Yes, so I didn't bring a quote from Stephen Hawking, I'm bringing Gartner. So according to Gartner, by this year, 2022, 85% of the AI solutions could have erroneous outcomes biased by the data, the algorithms, or even the people that are working with it. So considering that people are generally investing more and more on AI, I think this is an urgent call for action. And in my opinion, I think that this call for action is mainly also, or is also for governments and politicians that could help us and limit the abusive use of AI. Because in the end, it's not just about what AI can do with us, it's also what some specific and powerful companies can do with us by using AI. So just a final example, 2 years ago, some American citizens, sorry, I'm looking at you, they banned the use of facial recognition because it was being used by the police to classify people that was walking on the streets. So it identified criminal matches, okay? And at some point, there was legislation, so it was introduced to limit this type of situation. So I think we need to use these and other examples to expand this to other AI solutions, to other cultures, to other geographies, because in the end, AI is just another type of technology that shall be oriented, guided to a greater good, to a positive impact on society.
I think we're kind of almost out of time, Rajesh. If you can sum up quickly whether it is possible to regulate this or to keep an eye on it, even if there was regulatory control or even industry control. Do you think it's possible to keep a handle on it?
Yeah, I think I've taken a very practical view of this. See, we have done multiple programs in US and Europe with customers for AI and machine learning solutions. So far, not once has there been a requirement that it should be even explainable, forget ethical, right? The way I would say is that if even the service industry and the telcos in our context, but in my context, right? So if we began asking these questions every time we procure services or software, is your AI explainable? Just yes or no. That's a good starting point, I think. If you do that, those who are working on this will be forced to think back as to, okay, what should I do? How do I make it explainable? If I can make it explainable today, I'll make it ethical tomorrow. But I think that's where I would think that's more practical and doable because today's tech is there. We have the tech to explain, right? That's available. Only thing is it has to be demanded. There is no demand yet, at least in the commercial or business sense. If that starts happening, probably we'll have the momentum building. And then slowly I think it will permeate. And the government should take care after that. That's my view of it.
Great. Thank you, Rajesh. I think the point of today's panel debate as well was to get us all to think about ethics in AI. And the very fact that this debate is happening in an open forum, I think, is a good thing. And it shows that the industry does really, really care about this. So the next time you tick consent all when you're shopping or doing what you do on the internet like me and you just press the button because you want to go to the next page, you are consenting to all. So I'm not sure if you're ever going to read the small print, but cautionary advice there from the guys. The industry is watching you. So thank you very much, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you. Bye-bye.